Good evening to you both. And let's begin with Alberta teachers presenting a united front, voting nearly 95% in favor of going on strike.
Teachers have been propping up a system that is under-resourced and overburdened. Our students and their parents are paying the price.
Teachers now have 120 days to issue a 72-hour strike notice, meaning they could walk off the job anytime between now and October. In response to the strike vote, a statement from the finance minister says, in part, the Teachers Bargaining Association rejected the province's offer of 12% wage increases over 4 years, a number already accepted by other unions. The proposal also included a government commitment of more than $400 million in classroom improvements. Lise, what's your read on the message teachers are sending by giving such a strong mandate to walking off the job?
Well, it's a very, very strong mandate. I think that they really needed this very decisive vote because in my view, the government has exhibited a really high level of disrespect for the female-dominated unions like teachers and nurses. So this puts the ATA in a position to strike at the beginning of the school year in September, and that would be hugely embarrassing for the government. And they get a lot of pushback even from their own base.
Stacey, how do you see this strike vote playing in the current political climate?
Well, listen, I think that traditionally unions and governments have been adversarial, and so I don't think there's anything necessarily different about this time around. And I would say, the first thing is I totally understand where teachers are coming from, but I don't want my children used as bargaining chips in this kind of negotiation. And that's what it feels like, especially if we're headed into strike territory, whether it comes now, which I highly doubt it will come in June, likely to come in September when the kids are going back to school. And so that's going to make, I would suspect, a lot of parents quite frustrated and upset with that. And I think after having come through the last number of years with the pandemic, our kids are already behind. And I just don't think there's going to be that level of support for strike action. Not to take away from the fact that the teachers, should have better working conditions, not necessarily sure that there's a giant pay raise in their future. I think the larger issue for me is how schools in general are funded, and there's been chronic underfunding of our public school system. Set aside from the teachers' wages, things like repairing bathrooms and having classroom materials, that should be a major focus here.
Lise, how do you see the strike vote registering with parents, with students, with exams and the end of the school year in sight?
Yeah, well, I agree with Stacey. I don't think there's going to be a strike now in June. I think it's more likely to be in September. Hugely frustrating for parents. Kids would probably like a few days off of school, but yeah, I mean, this is collective bargaining, and this is a system that we have, and of course they're going to create pressure. The union will create pressure. But going back to Stacey's comment, we really have to focus on educational funding. Right now, we're 16% below the national average, and we have been near the bottom of the national scale since 2009. And it's not just bathrooms, what Stacey was talking about. It is also critically EA support in classrooms, which are growing. We have junior high classes of more than 40 students. That's becoming incredibly normal right now. So teachers are in a context of they're incredibly overburdened, really frustrated, and many are leaving the profession.
Stacey, what kind of pressure does this outcome bring to those negotiations with the province, which are essentially in limbo?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the other key thing to remember here too is the province has said that it's going to build 90 new schools, and that's nothing to sneeze at. Like, that's a really huge endeavor, and it's one that the province really desperately needs. Our school populations are growing, as Lise rightly points out. The classroom sizes are extraordinarily large. We know that in the last 2 years alone, our province has taken in more than double its usual allotment of new
Yeah.
citizens. They're coming from conflict areas. They require more support in the classroom.
Yeah.
And I'll go back to, my current experience having sat on a parent council for the last 3 years for one of my
Yeah.
kids' schools is I see what the budget looks like. And I was aghast the first time I saw the budget about like how much our schools are doing with how little. And so I think that the government is going to need to show that it's willing to do a little bit more. But I think that the unions are going to have to get smart about how they communicate this to bring parents on side. It'll look a lot better for them if they can bring on parent groups, school boards, school trustees to show there's a larger issue. Otherwise, they risk the danger of people seeing it as only a salary issue, and that will really turn the population against the teachers.
Okay. For us, next up, OPEC's Secretary General delivered the keynote speech opening the Global Energy Show in Calgary Tuesday. His message, in part,
I'm sure you have all been seeing the recent pushback against the unsustainable rush to unrealistic net zero targets and deadlines that were just fixated on deadlines and policy proposal really detached from reality.
OPEC projects demand for oil will rise by 24% between now and 2050. And the Secretary General told the Calgary gathering it will take trillions in investment in the coming decades to meet that demand. Stacey, the OPEC Secretary General also says there is no peak oil demand on the horizon. How do you see that message resonating in our province, especially given the federal government pledging to fast-track major infrastructure projects and Alberta pushing for pipelines?
Well, this messaging is nothing new to the sector. They've been ringing this bell for the last number of years, and with the previous Liberal government who landlocked the resource, and we've had countries that have been practically begging Canada for its ethically produced and high standard product between our oil and our gas, and I just. Not a surprise that OPEC is saying this, and they're saying it to a receptive audience of people who have the data, who already knew this to be the case. So really one needs to ask who is the ultimate audience, and hopefully that message sinks through. I mean, while there is some popularity in polls right now that Canadians want to see major infrastructure built. I mean, my worry or my concern has always been if we don't capitalize on these sentiments, right away, we're going to lose this momentum. And already today, we're seeing news stories that Carney and Trump have the workings of a deal. And so one has to wonder how deep the support is for infrastructure projects, especially if there is a deal coming that will remove tariffs. And so I really think it's incumbent on people to hold the new prime minister's feet to the fire on this one.
Lise, to pick up on some of those points, given global tensions over Trump tariffs, how do you see messaging at the Global Energy Show setting up for discussions at the G7 summit in Kananaskis in just a few days' time?
Yeah, I think that there's probably no doubt that a lot of what's being said is foreshadowing these conversations that are bound to happen at the G7. But going back to the Secretary General's comments on peak oil and his claim that there is no peak oil in demand on the horizon. I think we really do need to see these comments as being quite invested, and potentially not really about energy security, but instead about profit security for the petro states. I think it really needs to be balanced against the analyses of organizations like the International Energy Association, which has predicted peak oil by 2030. Yep, I think this is definitely about messaging, and we have to see it in those terms.
We heard from pollster Nick Nanos off the top tonight on a number of recent survey results, notably on expectations of the Carney government to start delivering results. Lise, what do the poll results say to you about the willingness of Canadians to give this government time to produce results, the so-called honeymoon period?
Yeah, it really does show that, there's a public out there that's pretty tired of delay and distraction, that wants to see a government that is at work, that is delivering results. But I think that there's a confusion. People are confused about how the government works. I mean, parliament sitting does not signify a government that is working. And I think it's possible for us to be advocating for urgency and accountability while also resisting the kind of shallow idea that working equals parliament sitting.
Stacey, how different do you think the level of patience is here in Alberta versus the rest of the country? And what are the political consequences of that level of patience?
Well, I'm a little surprised because I think that our premier has demonstrated, and most recently, that she's taking the new prime minister at his word. She's willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, it is one of the things that I admire about her leadership style is that she's not confrontational for the sake of being confrontational. So she clearly sees an opportunity here to work with the prime minister, and she clearly sees the opportunity of working with the rest of the premiers around the table. Again, back to my point that I made in the previous segment, which is there's an appetite right now to build major infrastructure projects, and so I think she's going to continue to hold his feet to the fire to make sure that there is some movement. Like there's going to have to be proof in action here. Otherwise, I sense that Albertans' tepid support will turn very quickly.
Lise, reports today of intensified talks over an economic and security deal between Canada and the U.S. Stacey touched on it in the last segment, a framework for such, even trading hands between Canada and the U.S. How would that change these dynamics?
Well, I think it's bound to change the dynamics a lot. I mean, if we're concerned to see a government that is at work and delivering results, this would actually be major. I mean, I think that a lot of the work that the Carney government is doing is happening behind the scenes. It's not happening on the floor of Parliament, and uh, he seems to me someone who's boldly focused on delivering results. I think it would change the conversation quite remarkably if we did have a deal with the U.S.
Now, Stacey, you've worked in the halls of power. How do you see expectations that Parliament continue to sit through the summer months, going over with MPs, regardless of party?
It's always the same thing, right? Like I know from behind the scenes that when MPs return back to their ridings, it's not like they get the summer off. They're working, they're attending events, they're meeting with constituents. Arguably, it's some of the harder work because they have to meet with real live people with real live problems. But I think that Mr. Nanos's poll very clearly shows that Canadians' expectation and their perception is that work gets done when MPs are in their office in Ottawa. And I think that there's a possibility this also means that Canadians would really like to see that collaboration happen amongst the political parties to get things done. And lastly, I would say Mr. Carney and his team, they may be doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and I have no doubt that they are. But they have a perception problem that they're dealing with, and it's a leftover from the last Liberal government. But they have to be able to show Canadians that they're working and that things are moving along, that there's progress being made. And however they wish to do that, but they need to do it. Canadians need to see that something different is happening other than the status quo.
Lise, with those perceptions and as all this plays out, surprised by the changing levels of support between the Liberals and Conservatives, as we heard from Mr. Nanos, especially given how close it was post-election?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that that there's a high level of support for the approach that that Mark Carney is employing here. He is very focused on delivering results. He's a smart man. He knows how to negotiate, and I think people are feeling like they have some trust in the Liberal government. Clearly, that this is having a very negative impact both on support for the Conservative Party, but also on the approval levels of Pierre Poilievre.
All right. I'm afraid we're out of time. I did want to ask you, Stacey, about Pierre Poilievre, but we know that there is a by-election coming, and I'm sure we'll get to touch on that level of support in the future. Okay. Have to leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you.
Great
Go
to see you
Oilers.
both. Yeah.